Well, so far we fans of the Parasite Eve series have been given two radically different titles that represent two completely different types of games. But I can only imagine what Squaresoft is cooking up next. Will they return to the roots of the series and make an incredible RPG with real-time battle mechanics? Or will they polish up that traditional survival horror gameplay that just barely missed the mark in their second game? Oh man, I can't wait to find out.
2,000 years later.
The third game in the Parasite Eve series took a little longer to come out than any of us had expected. After the release of Part 2, fans had more than 10 years of downtime till they could get their hands on another Parasite Eve game, and imagine our surprise when that game had neither the words Parasite nor Eve in the title. The third birthday started out its life as an episodic mobile game, but switched gears to the PSP pretty early in production. According to the devs, this is a spiritual sequel, which is supposed to explain the title change, but before we tackle that issue, let's find out what we're working with here. The year is 2013, and some type of mutated hive-minded threat referred to as the Twisted has destroyed most of Manhattan. When the government creates an organization to counter this threat, Aya turns up sporting amnesia and a brand new power to hijack a person's consciousness. Using this overdrive power, Aya is transported back in time to key events during the Twisted's initial takeover to help the army beat them back. During her little trips to the past, Aya meets up with Eve and Kyle Madigan from the second game, and from here the game becomes a very confusing trip into Aya's memories, laced with random time jumps and some of the most confusing storytelling I've ever seen. First and foremost, I want to call into question this game's status as a supposed spiritual sequel. Call me crazy, but taking place in the same universe with most of the same characters and having an actual place on the timeline is the textbook definition of a canon sequel. Now, from what I've been able to find out, the real reason behind the name change is Square losing the rights of Parasite Eve to the original book's author. So Square was pretty much left with a cast of characters and no story to put them in. And this is just speculation on my part, but I assume this explains why Aya's ability to control her mitochondria never gets brought up. So, aside from this being a weird type of official alternate universe fanfiction, does the story hold up? Well, no, not at all. First and foremost, this is one confusing mess of a plot, which is expected when time travel is a main theme, but there are narrative problems here you can't really blame on Back to the Future. For example, there are some scenes which give the impression they are repeats of previous scenes, sort of like some kind of sci-fi take on Groundhog's Day. It also doesn't help that almost every new character in the game is dedicated to double-crossing Aya at least once, and then add in time skips that are never explained and hardly ever hinted at, and you've got yourself one damn hard-to-understand story. Now, I would give it a few points for bringing back some characters from the previous games, but everyone seems to have been written by people who've never played the originals. Mida has changed from a nervous scientist who secretly harbors feelings for Aya to a damn stereotypical otaku pervert. Honestly, how do you go from this to this?
Nubile body, your DNA. Fascinating.
I'm going.
And as far as our main character goes, Aya's been reduced to some kind of emotional coma patient. It seems like every other line of her dialogue is a soft, breathy whimper, and the game's cutscenes always have her looking weak and on the verge of tears. And to those of us who fell in love with Aya's original strong-willed personality, this is a damn shame. Third Birthday ditches both the RPG and survival horror combat of its predecessors, and instead focuses on third-person shooting. And it's serviceable, I guess. Locking onto enemies can be a major pain, and the shooting is pretty bog standard. The camera's garbage, but I'm not sure I expected much else from a third-person shooter on the PSP. On the upside, weapon customization has made a return, and even though it functions basically the same as it did in Part 2, it fits well within the large number of guns that can be found and unlocked. The one mechanic that pulls the gameplay back from the brink of boredom is the overdive system. After you've inflicted enough damage on an enemy, it's possible to overdive into them, causing massive damage, but the real fun is found in jumping from one person to another during a heated firefight. This overdive system adds a cool level of tactical thinking to the game and serves a buttload of purposes. Not only do you get a lot of your weapons and ammo from soldiers that you dive into, but you can also escape a quick death this way. It's also a good idea to dive into allies for better positions and to escape traps. This one versatile system is probably the only thing that stands out about Third Birthday's gameplay, and this was definitely what kept me playing past the frustrating parts. As a huge fan of the PSP, I knew the system was capable of some really great visuals, and Third Birthday definitely cemented that belief. Everything is crisp and sharp, and upscaling using the FrameMeister results in a game that could pass for a very alias PS2 game running in widescreen. The areas in each mission are broken up into smaller arenas, but this is something any fan of the PSP is going to be used to by now. It does break up the flow of the more open arenas, but in buildings and confined areas, it fits in pretty well. Now, typically this is where I would talk about any problems I had with the game, but to be honest, there aren't many aside from some frustrating difficulty towards the end of the game. But before you take that as a recommendation, the reason I can't find more than a few issues with the Third Birthday is because it's just too damn bland. There really isn't anything to rave about, and on the opposite side of the coin, it's just too plain to really elicit any reaction from me. I guess if you're a fan of ridiculous nonsense and unresolved plot threads, you'll get into the story here, and if you love Aya Brea as a character, then you'll probably hate the fact that she spends 75% of the game panting and moaning in an unmistakably sexual manner, or how she gets damn near naked after you take enough damage. But to tell the truth, this doesn't really get me pissed like a lot of other Parasite Eve fans. And the reason for that is the Third Birthday strays so far from the other games that it may as well not be connected to them at all. Sure, you could explain a lot of this away when you find out that Square lost the rights to the story, but even with Aya and other returning characters making an appearance, it just isn't Parasite Eve. As a diehard fan of the first games, I was offended at first, but after just a few hours, I came to see this for what it is, an unrelated standalone title. The same way I can't decry Chrono Trigger fanfiction as unrealistic, I can't really judge this as a Parasite Eve game. And, well, that's a damn way to end this series, so what's the takeaway here? Well, the main thing I've learned from playing these 3 games back to back is that no one Parasite Eve fan is likely to enjoy any combination of the 3, but that's not to say any of them are bad or poorly made, they just don't follow any consistent design. Each game is wildly different from the last, and liking one of them doesn't guarantee you'll be able to get into the others. I guess you could argue that this is a varied franchise, and you'd be right, but as crazy as it sounds, I expect at least 2/3 of any series to fall under the same genre. I'm weird like that. So is this a series you should get into? Well, yeah, definitely, as long as you go into it knowing what you're in for. The first game is an all-time classic that deserves a spot on any list of the greatest role-playing games, and the second is a crazy attempt at survival horror that only a company like Square could come up with. And as for the Third Birthday, well, I'd recommend you steer clear of it. It doesn't stack up to either of its brethren and only offers a bland cover-based shooting experience in return for the frustration. And with that, we have wrapped up this retrospective. I want to thank you guys for coming along on this journey with me, and if you're looking for more full series retrospectives like this one, let me know in the comments below. But until then, I'm Jared, and this is Avalanche Reviews. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around. If you haven't seen the rest of this retrospective, click here to check it out. And maybe if you like what I'm doing here, pop over to my Patreon page and contribute to more videos just like this.